I got into music at a pretty early age. I started playing the saxophone in the fourth grade. Then I started to get into the choir in middle school and stuck with it through high school. When I graduated high school, I went to college and majored in music management and business. And then I also was in the choir there and also started then taking piano lessons. And then once I graduated college, I then started getting into production. So I started to purchase my production equipment and started working on software and working and making beats, learning how to make beats, and then working with local artists that were in the Atlanta area music scene. And as I started working more and more, I started going to a lot of music industry events and just doing a lot of networking, connecting with other creators and other artists, and doing more and more working with local and then as social media grew, people that were in other areas just really trying to get people tracks and producing. And then I heard about sync back in 2015 when I was reading the Donald Passam book, All You Need to Know About the Music Business, and it talked about getting music on TV and film as a way of generating revenue for your music. And then it was completely new to me, so then I started to research how that works. And from there, I started to learn what it sounds like, how it's arranged, and just studied, and then that was my first foray into the sync market, where I started to then create music, start pitching to various places to get my music on TV, and that's how I started to get into sync. What's good, everybody? My name is Brandon, aka IamBrahms, and welcome to Sync Masters. So some of the sync places that I have today, I've got placements on Fox with a show called The F Word. I have placement on BET Plus from a show with College Hill. I have placements on USA Network with Temptation Island, several seasons of that. I've got a placement on Fox Sports for NFL Sunday. I've got a placement with Jackson Hewitt for a tax advertisement that landed, and I've also got placements with Reels off DirecTV for a couple of shows there, and several others that I 100% can't name now, but yes, those are my placements. If you want to get started into sync licensing, the main thing that you first would want to do is really research, watch a lot of TV shows, watch a lot of shows or things that you're interested in, and pay attention to the music in the background and how the music is, what the music sounds like, how the music is placed, how the music is used in the scenes. Then you want to either online just research people who are already doing syncs, and just learn more about how they are actually making and arranging the music, and then from there you can look at who are the places, or where are the places where you can actually pitch your music. And there's a lot of different ways to submit music and pitch music, but you want to look at places that accept music that can be used for your sync licensing, and also the styles that they're actually actively pitching for, and then put all those things together, and then you'll eventually get your foot in the door. And then once that foot gets in the door, it's all a snowball effect from there. Building relationships with music supervisors or music libraries. It's a lot easier to start off building relationships with music libraries, because music supervisors, they go off people who they trust. They want to work with people who they know they're trustworthy, because the difference with sync licensing versus, say, working on records for artists and for record release, there's hard deadlines. They have to meet deadlines for production, for shows. The songs have to be cleared. They have to be cleared if there's any samples. They have to make sure all of the writers and publishers are in agreement. So there's a lot of work to be done behind the scenes. They like to work with people who they know that when they're getting the music and say a series wants to use the music, that the songs and everything has been cleared, or they can clear it with relatively ease and quick. So a lot of times you have to spend a lot more time to build a relationship with supervisors, because they're busy, and they don't know, if they don't know you yet, you got to build some kind of relationship. Music libraries are, again, a lot easier because, most of the time your relationship building there is just submitting through their website, through their email address. A lot of times they'll have a section where you're able to submit music, and in that case you'll just ask if they're accepting submissions. You'll submit your music. If they're interested, they'll ask you maybe to submit more or fill out the instructions to sign your music. So that's the basis of relationship building. And as time goes, and as you get more and more into it, you start to network with people who maybe have relationships with supervisors already. And as you build relationships with those people, then they can introduce you to the music supervisors. And because of their track record, the supervisors will be more inclined to work with you directly. But it's definitely a process. It's definitely, takes time, as any relationship does. And the key is just, don't be too abrasive, don't be too aggressive, and just kind of let it take its time. But definitely, I would say music library building, start off, that's the easiest, and then you can go from there, work with supervisors and even directors and production workers on TV or film. My major challenges going into sync, the biggest thing for me was understanding how to arrange the songs. So when I first started pitching my music, I just pitched whatever I had in my catalog to pretty much any libraries or anything that I found. And what I had to realize was that there is definitely a certain structure and way that the music is arranged, and also what types of music are placed where. So how I really overcame that is to really listen more to other people who have already been working into sync, understand how their music is, and also where that music is being placed. Specifically, like if you're looking at sports highlights and sports reels, there's generally certain types of music that's placed there, types of tempo and sound. If you look at detective and investigative series and drama series or movie trailers, there's always, typically, a lot of times there's types of music that they use. So for me, it's just understanding my style, my comfortability of what I can do the best, and then be able to create that on a consistent basis and be able to then pitch that to places where they accept and pitch that type of music. One of the biggest or another mistake that I really challenge that I ran into was trying to sort of overreach. In other words, I pitched anywhere and try to maybe work in genres that I really weren't that comfortable in, or it may take a lot more time for me to study and get comfortable at working there. And I think, again, understanding that you really want to put your best work forward at all times. And workaround for working in other genres is collaboration with other people who are also experienced in those genres. So those are the challenges that I started coming into the sync world and understanding how that worked, and how I sort of overcame that over time. So the way you start receiving and working with briefs is joining or signing with a music library or a music publisher. So once you are assigned from a library or a publisher, or have a relationship with a music supervisor, they will start to send you briefs. And what briefs are their specific requests for types of songs or instrumentals that they want to use for a project or show. And in those briefs, they're going to clarify or specify the type of music they're looking for. It could be anything from genre, it could be sounds, it could be tempo, and generally they're going to have some type of reference or example. So they give you reference points, usually send you a link or send you a playlist that you can go by. And just, so what you want to do then is you want to work, when you want to create to that brief, which means that you want to try to not copy, but you want to keep, sort of work in that vibe of the sound or tempo or style of music that they're requesting for. So mistakes that can negatively impact one's sync career. One of the biggest mistakes that you can do is submit things that are not dead on with the request that is being asked for by the music publisher or supervisor. This is not a lane where you want to try to, well, I kind of got something like this, it's a little bit like it, and so let me see what happens. That's not going to work. And if you try to blindly contact music supervisors and then you haven't done any kind of research of what they're working on, what they're currently working on now, what kind of music they do, you just kind of blindly submit things, that's not going to do well for you either. So, it's really important to understand, like, you need to really follow the instructions of what the brief calls for, and also follow the instructions of how they want it to submit, how they want you to submit it. So some people like links, some people like certain file formats, some people want you to upload to a certain site. So you have to really understand and just really follow the instructions there. Another big mistake you can make is not making sure your publishing and writing and split sheets are filled out correctly, and you don't have the contacts and things like that. That'll get you in trouble really fast, because again, you're working with deadlines with these shows, these productions. They have to have fast turnarounds, and they're already syncing your music to the scenes. And if they run into a hiccup where they can't get a hold of a writer, or a writer disagrees, or they're fighting over publishing splits, that song can't be used, and all of a sudden now your trust goes out the window. So it's very, very, very important to make sure that, whenever you're pitching, if you're working with collaborators, to make sure your split sheets are filled out, that everybody's in agreement. You can have a one-stop agreement, and that's taken care of. And it's also important to make sure you follow instructions on the briefs, specifically how they need to be created, and how you submit them to the publishers or supervisors. My top advice for anybody that wants to get into sync licensing is to just really spend time researching the shows that you like, that you watch on a regular basis, and really pay attention to what kind of music is used. And then think about the type of music that you make, and what are you best at? What are your favorite or even best genres? What are you most comfortable with? And then from there, I would say just research people who have already been doing it. You can get on YouTube or anywhere on social media now, and really study the people that have been doing licensing, and how they're creating and arranging their tracks, and how the tracks are being placed in different series. And then from there, it's just it's a lot of patience, it's a lot of focus, a lot of consistency, a lot of dedication. But you can definitely do it. It just takes a lot of time. And another big one that I would say, big tip here: collaborate. I mean, I'm always going to talk about collaboration. Collaboration is so important. Don't be afraid to reach out to people who've already been doing it, and ask if they're interested in collaborating. A lot of times, that's your foot in the door. Is they already have relationships with publishers or libraries. They can help get you started, and also, again, you can collaborate outside your comfortable genre. You can work in different genres based off different styles. So collaboration is key. You're building relationships there. You're building skills there with different genres and areas, and then even from there, you may get a mentor, or you may learn so much more just from collaboration. So those are my biggest takes to really get in sync licensing. So now I'm going to walk through a track that I did for sync. So this track came about from a brief that I received, and what they were looking for is music that was inspired by 80s old school hip hop. So the earlier 80s hip hop in the style of the Grandmaster Funk, that kind of music, that's what they wanted. So this particular song actually did not end up on the actual show that the brief came for, but the library did end up using it for another show called Hollywood House Lift with Jeff Lewis, which was it's aired on Freevee. So I'm going to kind of walk through just how I put this together, and I will say that pretty much any sync tracks, particularly instrumentals that I put together, I use this process. The one thing you want to really think about with sync arrangements is that the track always needs to move. There always needs to be something going on, or introduced, kind of building. You start off one way and you build, and you may have a breakdown that builds again, and you want to have something kind of always introduced, maybe 4 to 8 bars. You don't want it too repetitive, as if you were doing it for an artist. So the first thing I did with this particular track is I got the drums together. So I'm using Reason, and I use the redrum. I just got a basic drum pattern using analog sounds, and this is what it sounds like. So once I got that groove going, the next thing I did for this one is I introduced the bass. So again, but there's only 4 bars. So now I'm going into the next section. So now I'll introduce the bass line, which comes in here. Now I'm gonna go introduce another instrument. It's gonna be a synth instrument coming in. So again, as you know, every 4 bars, I'm trying to just put something in. I'm just kind of building up to that to a big chorus section. So now we're gonna introduce a synth here. And I'm keeping. I'm just I got a groove going. I'm keeping that the synths talking it, with the bass and the drums to kind of keep that groove going. And then once I got those going, now I'm going to introduce like a sort of a higher lead line, kind of fill up that higher end of the frequency spectrum, and kind of give that sort of melodic feel for the instrumental. So you're going to hear that line come in now. All right, so now we're gonna go what I would call in the chorus of the song. So I've introduced, kind of building up, and then this next part I'm gonna add another synth onto it, and just kind of create that sort of big feeling. So you always want to have, again, the songs need to have some movement. They need to be interesting. When the supervisors or people are listening to the track, it's gotta move and make them feel something, so that they feel confident and it matches the brief and what they want to use it. And it's always got to be interesting. That's the big thing. Always try to make it interesting as possible, and that's usually just adding or just changing elements throughout the track. So this is going to be the chorus section here. Okay, so I finished the chorus section, and I'll show, just some of the programs I'm using. I'm working solely in Reason, and most of the stuff that I use is their stock plugins. I use a Thor for the high synth. I used the Kong Monopoly for that has that sort of warm analog style feel for this as well. So, and then a lot of times what I'll do is I'll just play around with the mod wheel and the pitch bend to kind of give you that sort of like movement with those synth lines that you hear. So a lot of those like sort of like vibrato and bends, I use the mod wheels with the synths. And for this particular track, I didn't really like change any the patch settings. I just kind of found the patch that I thought would work, and that's what I did. So now we're back into the next section, which is what I call kind of a breakdown. So once you kind of hit that chorus of this, you want to kind of go into either like you can call like a second verse or like a second section, but it's sort of like you're at a high point of the track, so you kind of want to maybe take it down a little bit to kind of come down some, and then you're gonna work your way back up into like a chorus or vamp or way out. So this is the next section where and all I did here, I just kind of muted. I same idea, same motif. I just took some things out and just made it different than the last section. So in that section, I started off with the bass muted, reintroduced the bass into the next 4 bars. I added a little like synth bend sound just to kind of make it interesting, and also I also used some risers. So risers, crashes, things like that are great for transitions. You always want to have something where they don't have to try to figure out where you're going. So you want to make it as easy and simple as possible to, okay, this is the chorus section, this is the verse section, this is the intro, this is the outro, and using risers or some type of effect sounds or crashes or reverse crashes, reverse pianos, those kinds of elements in the track really kind of help the track move in from one section to the next. So now I'm going into the outro, and most of the time your outros on these tracks is just basically you're going back into the chorus. So you can call it the chorus slash outro, but essentially now you're going back into that high point, and then once you're at that finish this high point, you're gonna end the track generally on what we call a stinger, which is a 1 bar outro sort of movement where you just have like usually a kick drum, bass, maybe one synth on the downbeat, or you just let the track cut off pretty much abruptly. What you don't want to have in sync is tracks that fade out. You don't want to have them where there's like these real long decays. You don't want anything like that. You want to make it really easy for the supervisors to take your track and find different sections that they might be able to pull into the scenes of a show. All right, so I'm going to play the outro now. So I ended the track with just a crash on the downbeat of the last. So that's sort of like your stinger. So if you watch a lot of shows, particularly a lot of like reality shows or even sports highlight reels, you notice a lot of times they'll want to sort of like transition from scene to scene. They use sort of these sort of like stingers to kind of get you to those next sections. So it's important to kind of have either a stinger or, you know, again, just kind of let the track end abruptly so they can kind of, you know, get it in there. If you start doing like fade outs and stuff, it's harder for them to insert that in the scenes. So this was again, you know, pretty simple track, right? It's not a lot, you know, that I use, and you want to take into account that a lot of times this is going to be used in the background of dialogue or something's going on in the scene. So you have to be mindful of your sound selection. You don't want to have it too busy. You don't want to have a lot of real like high pitch or really distracting type of sounds throughout this your composition. You want to make sure it's open enough where dialogue or things can happen in the forefront, but also you want to always keep it moving, make it interesting, and you know, and make it pace, and you want to make it as easy as possible for the supervisors or directors to listen and understand the section of the track and where you're going. So this is Casino and Drum Machines. Again, this track was used on Hollywood Housewife with Jeff Lewis off Freebie. And this is how I composed this track for sync and how I would break down all my sync tracks. So pretty much for sync things, I use a lot of, again, I work in Reason as my main DAW, but Reason has a lot of good stock sounds with sampled instruments, so horns, strings, guitars, but I also use Contact a lot. So Contact has really good string sounds. It has good horns, pianos. A lot of times I'll actually create templates where I've already got Contact instruments built in, and in this track I didn't use any Contact, but I do have some that I've got it built in already. But typically, you know, anything that's sample instrument based, I'll bring out Contact. And in the most synth based things, again, I usually work directly out of the VSTs in Reason. So there's a Thor, there's Parsec, there's Subtractor, there's Monopoly from Korg. A lot of these synths get the job done. And then for drums, I use a lot of the sample libraries that you can get from Native Instrument extensions. I use a lot of that drum library, and I also use some stock sounds from Reason as well. Just depends on, you know, what the brief calls for. So I utilize that, and then sometimes I use live instruments. So you know, I do have collaborators that sometimes we'll work back and forth. People that can play guitar or play other instruments. We may build those into the track as well. So those are typically my tools for sync production. My thought process when I write and create for sync is I'm always try to get a picture of what the scene would look like as I'm working on the track and see how it would fit in a scene. You know, sometimes it's me just, you know, maybe I'm watching, you know, for instance, I'll watch a lot of sports. I watch a lot of sports highlights, a lot of sports reels, and then sometimes I'll even record the highlight and play it back on my phone, and so I can listen to the music and how it's being placed in that scene. And then when I go and work, I'm always thinking about, as I'm building my song, how that would fit in a particular scene, or what scene it would go for. And I typically will build it off that. And a lot of times that helps me, again, not overcomplicate things, not overproduce it or make too much, but also understanding how to use the right sounds and the right style and mood to fit in, certain sections and things like that. And I would say over time, the more and more that you write for sync, you have a better understanding of like where things can be placed, like what genres, what shows and things like that, and you start to kind of build yourself templates, or you start to you understand, okay, I need to use these sounds to kind of get this mood, or this whatever I'm doing, and it just becomes a lot easier. But I'm always, again, thinking about how would that fit into a scene, and is it too boring? Do I need to make it more interesting? Do I need to make a transition sound and things like that? So just really always my main element is I always try to, when I play it back and I'm listening to it, am I constantly moved throughout the entire song? And one other thing that I want to point out too is that sync music is generally shorter than most, like music you're gonna do for artists. So you're typically gonna be creating things that are about 1.5 minutes to 2 minutes long, maybe a little longer sometimes, but that's generally 1.5 minutes to 2 minutes long. That's all you need. So you always want to make sure you move quick, and you also want to have it always make it interesting. So I always try to go back, listen to my track, and make sure that it's always moving. I always feel like it's moving, and I'll either add or take away things as needed. So the thing about using loops and samples for sync, and I personally would say, stay away as much as possible. And if you can, and the reason why is because a lot of loops that people have, they might get it off, Splice, or these other places where people are uploading loops, and they sometimes they're coded as royalty free, but they don't really know a lot of times where the loop came from. And so it's just that you always run into a risk with a loop or sample not being cleared. And that's a big no-no in the sync community. That's like, like you walk to a street vendor, and they offer you something, and you get that whatever they offer you gives you food poisoning. Well, you're probably never ever going to that street vendor again. And that's kind of how the sync community works with music, that they might place your song, but then they get a lawsuit, or something happens because something didn't get cleared, and then there's a lawsuit coming. So the problem with loops and samples is that unless you or yourself have cleared them, or that they're cleared, or that you have a relationship with the publishers, or the person who made the loop, and you can verify that it's been cleared, then it's okay to an extent. But if it's a lot of unknowns, and then also with loops, again, you have multiple people using the same loop, so then there becomes a mix up there, because you might have 10 songs with the exact same loop, and then who owns what part of the songs, and so it gets real convoluted. So I'm not really big on using loops and samples. I mean, drum samples are fine because they're generally percussion elements, or like hits and things like that, one shots. Those are probably okay. But when you start looking at different melodies and different grooves, you got to be really mindful. If you have to do it, I would say definitely manipulate it, definitely make it and arrange it in a way where it's unrecognizable. But just pulling and copy and pasting and pulling it from, I would highly not recommend that for sync licensing. So building a trust with Music Supervisor, the biggest thing is, or I say biggest thing, big things that you can do. Do what you say you're gonna do, right? So first, if there's a brief out that you might get, that they might send, or they're pitched out, and you have a relationship, contact with them, you want to try to submit to that exactly what they instructed, meaning like you're following what their instructions are, and it's exactly what they're looking for. But then you also want to make sure that your your turnaround is not super long. If it's a 24-hour deadline, you want to try to get it in that deadline, and you really want to be easy to work with. And easy to work with means you're easy to get a hold of. If they come to you for any kind of revision or change, you're able to provide that in a pretty quick turnaround, and your stuff again is cleared. You have all your splits, correct, filled out. Everybody is good to go. And I think that more than anything is super important. That builds that trust, because again, these supervisors are very busy. They have a lot of music they have to source. They have to make sure everything works and gets into your pitching to directors and producers. And they have to make sure everything's cleared. And there's nothing easier to do than to lose trust when your stuff is not cleared, or there's some kind of hiccup there where it now they've got to go to a whole nother track to try to meet a deadline. So yeah, I think building trust is really kind of just do your best work, follow their instructions, make sure your splits and everything is clear on your side, and then from there, once if your music is able to to land and people like it, then they'll come back to you for more. All right, ladies and gentlemen, once again, my name is IamBrahms, and thank you for tuning in to Sync Masters.